friends, and welcome to Bad Book Club, where I, Jade, a silly goose with an English degree, read classic and popular literature so you don't have to. Hello, book nerds! Welcome back! This is our first Wednesday episode. Again, thank you for being flexible with me. I didn't realize that Wednesdays would work better until I tried out Tuesdays, and I realized that Wednesdays just work out better for me than Tuesdays do. So thank you so much for being flexible and staying with me, despite my craziness. And anyway, on this week's spooky October episodes, we are talking about Twilight. Okay, I know. Jade, why? I'll tell you why. Because you have all heard of it. Plus, it's a coming-of-age story. It's about spooky Halloween vampires. And because I thought it would be fun and silly. I also think I'll try to keep the summary not too long because, honestly, I don't want to get bogged down in Twilight information. So I'm just going to jump right into it, all right? So let's talk about Stephenie Meyer, okay? So honestly, I thought that I wouldn't have that much discussion for this episode until I started reading things about Stephenie Meyer, but I'm going to get to that in a second. Let's just start with the fact that I honestly think she gets too much flack. All right, she's a prolific writer who has entertained a ton of people. She had an original idea that she wrote an entire, very successful series about, which is impressive. And in fact, the reason the story got published, that I learned, is that the publishing house had an intern approve it before realizing that 130,000 words is far above the normal 60,000 word standard for young adult fiction. So it was a mistake that she got published, which is really interesting because it was incredibly successful. But anyway, she also says that each Twilight book was influenced by a specific older story. So the first book was based on Pride and Prejudice. Now, I actually find that really interesting. I took a whole class on Jane Austen, so of course we talked about Pride and Prejudice, and along with my opinions about some things about this book, especially the feminist part of this book, or the feminism, or I don't know, whatever, I think it makes for some very interesting discussion, but I'm getting ahead of myself and we're going to get to that. The other interesting thing I learned in my research is that Meyer is Mormon and has said that there is some influence of her beliefs in terms of free agency in the book. If you don't know what free agency is, that's okay. I figured I knew what it meant, but I looked it up anyway, and I read some really interesting things trying to learn what it meant. But basically it means that it's this belief that each person is born with the inalienable right to choose and to experience both good and evil, and that we are constantly tested to make sure that we are making the right choices. So yes, that is in her books, Free Agency, which I'm going to talk about more. And she also talks a lot about immortality and mortality. So with that information in our heads, let's jump into the summary because unfortunately, I don't think you'll understand my discussion rant unless I tell you some of the story. So go! We start off with a preface about how she is going to die, about to die, by a hunter sauntering towards her because she moved to Forks. It's a little heavy-handed for me, but okay, I like intrigue. I'm into it. We actually open with the story itself, with Bella's mom driving her to the airport so she can fly to Forks to live with her father, Charlie. Why is she doing this? We don't know, but her mom says she doesn't have to. But Bella says that she wants to, but she also tells us she definitely doesn't want to move away from Phoenix to Forks. So the teen angst starts really early, and I imagine it's to build suspense for the reader, and in a way it does. So let's keep reading, I guess. She lands in Forks, and Charlie, who she calls Charlie, her father, which I think is weird. Just call him Dad, but whatever. Anyway, Charlie is sweet and shy, and he blushes at Bella's thank yous like a teddy bear. And he says that he got her an old car. And when they get to his house, it's raining, by the way, which Bella hates. She checks it out and actually really loves it. It's a very old, beat-up red truck with a lot of character, and it appeals to her, so that's nice. We also learn that it's her first day of school at Forks High School tomorrow. With only 357 students, she is not excited about it, especially since she doesn't relate well to people, quote unquote, which probably definitely has nothing to do with the story, am I right, folks? She still unpacks, and we get a description of her dark hair and pallid skin in the mirror. She sleeps fitfully because the rain keeps her up with its constant raining, which is obviously terrible. Stop hating on the rain. I really like rain, but whatever, it's fine. And in the morning, it is time for school. All right, we are only a couple pages in, but first impressions. It is a real quick start. We've already moved, met parents, and we don't know why, and she is for real bummed. Now, I don't mind a quick start. I like getting places. Scoop that reader up. It is a solid choice. The con of that for me is that I get to know the characters not that well. Like, how invested can I be in the story of Bella's first day of school if I only know 3 things about her? She moved for some reason we don't know. She likes her truck and she hates rain. Same with the parents. Like, mom had 2 lines. So I'd say I'm not very invested, but I am a little curious. So the first day of school, she runs into a pole. Oh wait, that was me. That was so funny, am I right? Anyway. First day, nothing much interesting happens on her first day except that a bunch of guys are very interested in her, and she is told about the mysterious Cullen kids, the 5 adopted children, 2 of which are couples, which is weird, that never talk to anyone or eat food and are inhumanly beautiful. Inhumanly beautiful. A girl at lunch tells Bella that the boy with brown eyes is Edward Cullen. In biology that day, Bella is forced to sit in the open seat next to Edward, and he acts real strange with her the entire time. He's glaring angrily and leaning away from her and covering his nose, and when class is over, he zooms out, and she runs into him later trying to switch out of that biology class. She is really upset by that and very confused and hurt because she doesn't understand why he hates her so much. But a couple days later, he warms up to her a little bit and starts to ask her questions. He's like, why are you in Forks? To which she says her mom wanted to travel with her new husband, but since Bella was there, it was holding her back. So Bella decided to leave. She seems to have some issues with her mom not being an adult, but we don't really get that deep into it. We don't ever talk about it unless it's in a conversation with Edward. It's never in her own musings other than constant weird emails from her mom that she receives, but what can you do? On a nicey day, while standing next to her car in the school parking lot one morning, she spots Edward by his car right before another driver goes spinning on the ice towards her. Suddenly, Edward is there in a confusing scene where essentially he stops the car from hitting her and lifts the truck so it won't crush her legs. Despite this amazing feat, no one sees it but Bella, who has hit her head, and she is rushed to the hospital where the stunning Dr. Carlisle Cullen cares for her, and Edward refuses to answer how he reached her so quickly. This book isn't really subtle, by the way. I mean, come on, I would assume if vampires exist, they would do a better job of hiding than this, not eating lunch at school. Bros, what are you doing? Anyway, on another day, they actually sit together at lunch, and Edward is very mysterious about how she shouldn't be his friend because he's dangerous, and she wonders, what is he? Which is such a non-reaction. He's like, I'm dangerous, and she's like, what is he? But the thing that there is even something to be, there's no reaction to that, I guess. I don't know. And that day during bio class, their biology class, that Edward skips, they do blood typing, and Bella faints from the blood because she can smell it. Okay. And Edward sees this and carries her to the nurse and takes her home afterwards. And she's also noticed that his eyes keep changing color from brown to black. What could he be? I wish I understood what this mysterious pale man could be, who does not eat and refuses to be in class for blood typing. I wish I understood. Anyway, on a weekend getaway with friends to the beach, that Edward refused to join when she invited him, by the way, she meets Jacob, a young boy whose dad knows her father. He's also way younger. I thought this was a love triangle, but I think the movies must have played that up because it's definitely not. Right now, anyway. And he tells her about the myth of these things called the Cold Ones and their legendary rival with them and his pack. And he says the Cold Ones are the Cullens and they are not permitted on their land in order to keep the peace. Could they be vampires? Says Bella, the smartest 17-year-old you know who cracked this difficult case. The next big event is a day out that Bella goes on with her 2 girlfriends. They are shopping for dresses for an upcoming dance that Bella isn't attending because she can't dance, and Bella walks to find a bookstore while they're in town. Unfortunately, she gets lost and stalked by a group of men who nearly corner her. Luckily, a pale vampire saves the day in a shiny Volvo and whisks her away because, get this, he's been following her to make sure she's safe. How dare she be so foolish? I am irate right now, says Edward. They have dinner together. Not Edward, but sure. And he drives her home, and he admits that his whole family are indeed vampires. By the way, can anyone just tell this secret? Are there not, like, rules? No, like, you can just tell anyone at any time you're a vampire. Like, how have they not been discovered if this is how vampires operate? But okay then. Oh, by the way, he can also read minds, which is how he was following her. Mind you, not Bella's mind. Bella is special, and he cannot read her mind. His family also has some cool tricks up their sleeves, like his sister Alice can see the future, and Jasper can influence your feelings. All super fun. Bella is like, cool beans, bruh. I'm totally fine with that. And he explains that while they're vampires, they're also vegetarians and only feed on animals. All right. He also mentions that the sun doesn't burn him. Now, what does it do to you? After this, they get really lovey-dovey with each other, despite, like, never touching and the fact he's a mythical creature. But what can you do? And they go on a hike one day when it's sunny, and Edward angrily shows her his dangerous, sparkly skin in the sun and his crazy vampire strength breaking and tossing trees around. He also says that her smell is delicious to him and that he has had trouble touching her since she smells like a yum-yum steak dinner. Time for cuddles, and then he gives her an epically fast piggy ride that makes her faint and dizzy, and they arrive back at the car. And that night they kiss, and Bella gets too into it, and he has to pull away lest he accidentally rips her throat out. Because that's sexy, right? But anyway, that night he stays at her place and cuddles with her all night, and we also learn he's been watching her sleep, which is totally normal and chill, right, ladies? That's how I met my husband, asleep in a chair, watching me sleep. I don't know what that is, but anyway. It's also age inappropriate, but what can you do? There's a lot of whatever in this book, okay? There's a lot of, like, suspending my disbelief, okay? But it's fine. It's fine. The next day, he says that he wants Bella to meet his family, and she is excited and not scared of vampires at all, which, debatable, okay? I'd be very scared to go to a house of vampires. But what can you do? They go to this beautiful, mysterious house in the woods, and their riches are insane because of Alice's stock market savvy, since she can see the future. I guess of anything she wants? I don't know. And his family is cool enough, except Rosalie, who's like a real party pooper. And she also learns about their history. Carlisle, the dad, was a preacher's son, and they were killing vampires when he was bit, and eventually turned into a vampire himself. And being a vampire tried to make his life mean something and became a doctor. He turned the others to save them from death and made them all into a family. All of them but Alice, who wandered in with no memory of her past, and Jasper, who was with her, who used to be a Confederate soldier. Edward is the only single boy who once tried eating humans as like a thing, but didn't like it. So what can you do? It's just not yummy to snack on humans, I guess. That night, Alice tells us that she knows there's a thunderstorm coming, so they're going to play baseball. Apparently, the thunder is needed to cover the sound of their bats hitting the ball. Bella sits out because she is just so clumsy. And unfortunately, another group of vampires hear them and come upon them. There are 3, and the leader, Laurent, seems like chill-ish, but his hunter boy, James, sees Bella and decides he must kill her and hunt her for the challenge, since they refuse to share her, which is definitely true. When I see someone else's cat and they refuse to let me take that cat home, I'm like, I gotta kill it, because obviously, right? Everyone can relate to that feeling. To save Bella, the whole family splits up, and Bella goes back to Phoenix as soon as possible. That's her idea, by the way, since she's such a smarticle particle. And Edward and Emmett and Carlisle will stay and hunt James down. Edward gives Bella 15 minutes, yes, 15 minutes, to stop by home and shout at her poor father that she hates everything in Forks, and then leaves with Alice and Jasper, which... okay, aren't you a minor? Like, your dad's just gonna let you, like, walk out? Like, there's no way my dad would let me do that if I was 17. Like, even if we had an argument, my dad would be like, don't leave, like, stay home, I'll make you pie. Like, I don't know, like, the whole, like, stalking out and your dad being like, okay, guess she's gone. Like, when you're 17? Like, no, but whatever. Also, you and Edward, right, for doing that? Like, you have 15 minutes. Like, I understand someone's trying to kill you, but, like, to give her, like, a timer on that, like... come on, take him with you. I don't know. But anyway, now she's stuck in a hotel in Phoenix with Alice and Jasper guarding her. Where are her parents for real? Like, where's her mom? Like, does her dad think that she's found her mom and her mom has just like not called her dad? I have so many questions about the parents, but whatever. And Jasper has his cool power and chills her out with it, like because he can influence emotions. And Bella learns about the vampire change, which is like a painful 3-day process with like vampire venom. And Edward refuses to turn her or tell her about it. And Alice also has a vision of a room full of mirrors. And Bella recognizes her old ballet studio. Bella also tells us that Alice and Jasper are like really odd like during this bit. Like while they're staying there, they don't sleep because I guess vampires don't sleep. And they also like stare off at the TV without caring, without moving for hours, and it like really spooks her. Like, but it doesn't spook her. There's a lot of it spooks me, but I'm not scared at all type of stuff happening that I'm like, is that like an inner struggle, or is it just like overlooked by the author that she has like she gets weirded out but not scared, I guess? I don't know. Whatever. But anyway, while we're watching Alice and Jasper be statues, Bella has been waiting with her whole being on a call from Edward to see how this hunt of James is going because she wants to make sure that he doesn't die and whatever. I feel like honestly in this moment I'd also be thinking about like my family, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe she doesn't care that much. We haven't really seen the parents and they haven't noticed that she's been gone for days, but I don't know. But anyway, she finally gets a call. Her phone rings, and she answers it, expecting Edward. But it's James, the hunter. Yes, gasp. What? He tells her to go to a different room. And so she goes to a different room. And he talks to her and says, like respond blank so that the vampires don't get suspicious of your conversation, which I feel like is suspicious if she goes to a different room, but I don't know. Anyway, he plays a recording for her of her mom in the background being like, Bella, Bella. And he says, I have your mom. And she's like, gasp, this mom that I've like met once. And he says that she has to get away from the vampires who are watching her and go to him at her old ballet studio, or he's going to kill her mom. And he's like, you have like a little while to get here. Like, get it. She's like, that's impossible. But he's like, you have to figure it out. And she's like, okay. And just as luck happens, they just go to the airport to meet Edward so that she can fly off with him to a different location. And instead, while they're in the airport, she's like, oh, Jasper, I have to go to the restroom. Will you come with me? He's like, sure. And since he's a boy, he doesn't go into the bathroom, so he stays outside the bathroom. And she goes into the bathroom, and I guess this bathroom has a second exit, and she takes that exit. And she leaves the airport and is like, haha, I got away from my vampires. Now it's time to go to Bad Vampire. My question during this time is, why not just tell the vampires that Alice can see the future? Like, my first reaction would to be like, hello, vampires. Like, he has my mom. He cannot possibly know that you told them. You guys could stage something like this. Like, they could show up with you and stay afar. Like, they're capable. Like, I don't know why that whole bit of like, I must handle this myself is like utterly dumb. And at this point I was like, oh God, like just watching someone dive headfirst into a toilet is like not really a fun thing to read, but what can you do? Anyway, she makes her way to the old ballet studio, and James is waiting there for her alone with a home video that he used to trick her into thinking that he had her mom. Now, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. I have very few patience for like stupid people and like characters that make stupid mistakes. I can bear it better if the character realizes that they make a stupid mistake, or they themselves know that they tend to make stupid mistakes. Like if it's like an honest, like a character flaw, like they're like, oh, like I just have trouble because every time I see a vampire, I want to trust him. And that's really stupid. Like if they're aware of their character flaw, I am much more forgiving of that. But to like just actively like go into this situation, already ignoring the vampires that you could have told, like, and then seeing that it's a home video, I was like, isn't she supposed to be smart? Like, it's one of those things where if you set up a character to make her smart, please have her continue to be smart. Like, she can make mistakes. She can think that she's extra smart. Like, that's a good mistake for a character who thinks that they're smart. Like, if she thinks that she's smart, have her be someone who thinks that she's never wrong, and then have that brutally shown to her, right? And like maybe that's what she's trying to do here, but she hasn't been acting smart. Like the escaping from vampires isn't smart in my opinion, because that's what the bad guy told you to do. So like while you were able to do that, it's not necessarily the smart move, it's what you were told to do. So I don't know. It's fine. It's one of those things where I just don't like it that much, but what can you do? Anyway, she is now standing in a ballet studio with the hunter that you will probably remember from the opening prologue. Okay, so it's James and her in the room, right? And he's this like real weirdo. I wish that we had gotten to know him a little bit better as like a villain. I tend to appreciate villains better if they're a little bit more fully developed, and there's someone that we are afraid of, that we know to be afraid of. But it's all right. This is the first book. It's okay. What can you do? Anyway, he does this weird thing where he like pulls out a camcorder so he can record her death and then send it to the Cullens. Because, fun fact, ladies and gentlemen, do you remember how Alice never realized how she became a vampire and has no memory of her past? He admits that Alice is actually who he wants to torture, because an older vampire he knew turned her and then like refused to share her or something, or like turned her when he wanted to turn her or something. And he says that she doesn't remember her previous life because she was in an insane asylum and spent her time in like a prison cell because her parents faked her death and then sent her there because she had visions. And so he says that, and that's like nice. I would say that I wish that she'd left that a mystery. We didn't need to learn that this early on. I feel like I don't know Alice well enough for it to matter to me that she doesn't have a backstory. I think that this book, in a way, like, I'm going to talk about this more at the end. I have trouble not getting into discussion when I'm at the points that bothered me or at the points that made me think of things. But basically, I think that as a character, Alice is not fully formed enough for me to even care about her that much. So I don't care about her past. And to wrap up a story with a perfect little bow says to me that it's not a very good story, because I feel like you should leave questions and you should leave things that don't make sense. And there are some things that are still open to interpretation at the end of the book that I'm going to talk about. I'm getting on a tangent. You want to know what's happening. So James is there for her. He sets up this camcorder. He's like, I know Alice and I'm going to torture you because I'm going to torture her. And anyway, she tries to run. She's like, all right, let me just try this thing, see if I can get away from this vampire. And he trips her and breaks her leg, which is really violent. Like, I did not know that it was going to get this violent. I don't know what I expected whenever she went to the vampire, but we just haven't had any violence in the book at all so far. Like, we're literally at the very end of 130,000 words. It's a lot of words for a book. Like, I feel like I've been telling you this summary quickly because, in my opinion, while there are a lot of words, there are only a couple of actually important bits. Otherwise, it's a lot of her daily life, like making food for her father, stuff like that. So I've glossed over those bits and just told you the parts of the book that, in my opinion, matter. So, but in order to have that many words and for me to feel like I don't know Alice that well, and for me to feel like we haven't had any violence so far, and then you just throw this in at the end, it was like a little shocking. He also tosses her into the mirrors and like breaks them, and she falls into like a shatter of mirrors and she's bleeding profusely because I guess blood is now not an issue for her. And this whole time, by the way, Bella is like at peace with this decision because she says that she would rather die for like her friends. Like, she thinks she did the right thing. Like, she came here because she wants to protect her mom, so it sucks that she has to die, but like she's okay with it. Like, that's how she's feeling. And that's like an okay thought, but I wish that she had a bit more fire. Anyway, he tosses her into the mirrors. Blood's not an issue for her. And he goes in for the kill, I guess, you know. And he bites her wrists. And she's like, ow, oh no, my leg. And bam, the Cullens arrive. They have somehow found her. They drag James off of her and take him into a corner. And Carlisle starts working on Bella's leg. Edward is sitting by her side, holding her hand, being like, please live, my love. These two are in like full-blown Romeo and Juliet obsession with absolutely no connection, in my opinion. And Bella starts to scream in pain. And they realize vampire venom, because remember how we learned that it takes 3 days to turn into a vampire. Well, she also told us it's incredibly painful. So now there's venom. Edward, suck out the venom, because that's totally a thing that's real, and you definitely won't infect yourself, and venom in the bloodstream is just like chilling at the top, and you can definitely just like suck it out if you get there on time, right, everybody? No, that's not true. In case you guys didn't know, if you ever have a friend that's bitten by a snake, you definitely should not suck the venom out, because it just goes to the bloodstream and it doesn't do anything for you to do that, and you could possibly poison yourself too. So don't do that. It does not work. I find that in a book where there are vampires, like, I understand that you're in a make-believe world, you know, but I also don't appreciate the like lack of a Google search on this. Like, this book went through so many hands and so many revisions, and every single time they're like, yeah, he can totally suck the vampire venom out. I was like, okay. Edward is like, no, I cannot possibly. She is far too juicy, and if I suck on her, she'll definitely like die because I'll drain her. It's not like there's like 4 vampires here who could possibly drag me off of her or anything like that. But anyway, I'm refused to do this, even though she'll definitely turn into a vampire. And they're like, no, you have to. And somehow Edward is able to make it happen. He takes the venom out. He you know, like, drinks her blood, and he's like, oh, she tastes clean now, because I guess she didn't taste clean with the venom in her, and she still has blood inside of her body, so that's a success. And during this time, the people in the background are ripping James to shreds, and then they set the building on fire, which I'm fine with. That guy can die. He was like very, very uncool. And the next day, I'm assuming, waking in the hospital, Bella and Edward talk about the revelation that Alice like was in a, you know, like little prison, and that she was in an insane asylum, and that like her old master turned her and stuff like that. And honestly, I wish that we had gotten Alice's point of view on that. Like, we learned this big thing about Alice, and we never see her again. Like, we see her again at the end of the book that I'll tell you about, but it's not even mentioned to her. Like, it's odd for me that an event would happen like that and we don't get to see the impact of it. You know, like, if it doesn't have an impact, then why include it, in my opinion? Like, I feel like a sentence should serve a purpose. And if it doesn't serve a purpose, then it shouldn't be there. So I had trouble with that, because in this, like, it made almost no difference to me as a reader. I'm sure to maybe some people it was. Maybe it was like a big thing they've been wondering about this whole time, and they're like, whoa, I didn't know. That's very cool. And that's cool too, but I wish that we had gotten to see at least the impact of it, because I feel like it would have made it that much stronger of a meaning that it was put in the book, you know? So anyway, but they talk about that, and her mom comes in, and Edward pretends to be asleep. Her mom's name is Renee, by the way. This is the second time that we've seen her this whole time. And she's worried because Bella has fallen down some stairs at her hotel. Now, ignore the fact that she is somehow able to be in a hotel at 17, that her parents aren't upset at her because she went to a hotel, ? And third, that she just fell down a ton of stairs and this happened to her. Like, I thought that was kind of a lame excuse. Like, I thought car accident, right? Like, car accidents happen all the time. They talked a ton about her truck, her really old truck, right? Like, I was like, that would have been like a good excuse, I guess. It was a car accident. But they went with falling down the stairs. And I guess Alice and all the other vampires fabricated enough evidence that it made sense that she's like fallen down the stairs. And I guess the doctors just didn't question like the puncture or glass wounds. Maybe she went through a window, but she fell down some stairs. That's the story that she told her parents. And she asks, like, this guy's been around a while. Like, who is he? Are you dating him? And she's like kind of worried, I guess. And she explains away that Edward is just a crush. Oh, he's just a crush. Like, it's fine. Don't worry about it, Mom. And her mom's like, okay, bye. Which, if I was like in a hospital bed, I don't think my mom would leave. Like, I think she'd be like, I'm going to stay here. Like, why would your mom just like see you for 5 minutes and then walk out? Like, after you just woke up after like a harrowing ordeal. Like, I don't know. It's odd to me that she only stayed around for 5 minutes. Edward wakes up, quote unquote, because he was never asleep. And he's like, yeah, I guess I'm just your crush. And she's like, you believe that? No, you're with me forever. And Edward is like obviously uncomfortable. He thinks that this whole deal was his fault. Like, he's like, yeah, but if you hadn't met me, then you wouldn't even be in danger like this. And he's like, oh, it's just so sad. And he's like, oh, we should break up. And she's like, no, I'm not breaking up with you. Like, promise you'll never break up with me. Like, I'm not myself without you. And like, I love you and we'll never, ever, ever leave me, promise. And he's like, okay, I promise. And now that seems dramatic. But my husband gets upset and blames himself when he thinks he's like vaguely hurt my feelings. So I feel like the feeling that he might blame himself would be accurate. But I also know that my husband like wouldn't break up with me because of that. It sounds like a rickety relationship that like at any moment he could break up with you because he hates himself. That doesn't seem like a good, like that seems like you need therapy. Like, it seems like a real rickety relationship. This is very like, it's hard for me to believe this is based on Pride and Prejudice because I would assume it's Romeo and Juliet with the way that things are going, right? But what can you do? I'm saying what can you do a lot. I'm really sorry. It's my only phrase for like, I guess there's nothing I can do to like explain that. So let's just keep going. But anyway, he kisses her and her heart monitor goes crazy, which is very cute. And at the end of this book, she tells her family that she actually wants to keep living in Forks because it's her home now. And she goes back to Forks and she apologizes profusely to her dad, which we're told about, but we don't see, which is kind of sad and a little disappointing because her dad so far has been like a real cutie and he just hasn't had that big of a role this whole time. And it's hard because I felt like so sad for him when she yelled at him. And then it's like we don't even get to see that redemption arc of like her dad forgiving her and them being closer or anything. It doesn't have any effect on the relationship. Like she could have thrown like an airhead at his face and it would have had the same effect because like I don't get to see what happened. I don't get to see the impact. Like obviously he's sad, right, when she leaves, but like I don't get to see them reconcile. I don't know. It was an odd way for me to end that relationship because it makes it feel to me like the dad's not that important in the story. And I think he should be if she's a minor. She talks to her dad, apologizes, and he's like, okay, and whatever. And in the epilogue, months later, Alice dresses her up and puts her in heels with a broken leg somehow so she can attend a surprise with Edward. And this is the part I was talking about that Alice is involved in, and yet we don't get any mention of her past, but it's an epilogue, I guess, so she just wants it to be like a nice moment, but then again, why include Alice if you're not going to talk about the new fact about Alice that we learned, but it doesn't matter. She goes to prom because it's prom, and he surprises her. He's like, welcome to prom, and she's like, oh, I'm a terrible dancer, but she has a good time with Edward because he can dance, and at the prom, Jacob shows up on account of his dad. His dad said he'd pay for a car part if he went. And he says that he's supposed to warn Bella not to be with Edward. And like very like frankly says like, I'm into you basically. And he says that he's like, she describes him as looking a little older now. It creeps me out a little bit that he's younger than her, but whatever. And anyway, Edward and her have a great time and they leave the dance and Bella also refuses that, by the way. She says, yeah, I'm going to stay with Edward. Why don't you get out of here? And Edward and her leave the dance and talk a little bit. And he realizes that she thought he was going to turn her into a vampire tonight. And he's shocked and angry about it. And he's like, I'm not going to turn you. Like, I really don't want to do that. And she's like, yeah, but it's my choice, right? And he's like, yeah, but like, you have a life to live. And she's like, I don't like humans that much. And he's like, oh, well, whatever. And instead, they kind of work it out and they kiss and they stare into the twilight, which Edward sadly says is another ending. And that's it. So discussion time. Okay, let me just say first, I know I've been pretty hard on Twilight in this summary. That's because this is my second time looking at it. So I often see the more flaws and I see more cracks in the story when I evaluate it versus whenever I first read it. So if I was reading it and telling you the summary as I went, I'm sure I'd have much more positive things to say. It's just that I tend to get analytical when I'm describing it. So usually that's helpful because I can tell you a bit about it, but it might sound like I'm kind of tearing it apart. And that's not my intention. I want you to know that I did read this book in like one day. Like it was a fun read. There's something to be said for fun, fast reads, right? Like it's a good time. I was interested in the story and I wanted to know what was going to happen. It had its moments that I was like, what? But I was like able to move past those and it was overall like a good read. So I just wanted to say that, like, no shade. If you really like Twilight, like stand by that opinion because it's a good book. Like she took the time and she wrote a book that was incredibly famous. So anyway, I am excited to get to my discussion though, because despite the fact that I liked it, I do have a lot to say because I have a lot to think about. And like I said, I didn't have a lot of discussion until I looked into Stephenie Meyer's like backstory, and her backstory and claims about this book are really interesting. So I can't wait to talk about it. First of all, my very first thought, there were less love triangles than I thought. There was a lot of boys who hit on Bella, but there wasn't like the Jacob-Edward triangle, so the movie must have really hammed that up because there was more of a plot than I thought it would be, and it was honestly just a better book than I thought it would be. Like, it surprised me. Like, I was like, oh, this was actually not that bad. Now, I do have some thoughts about how it could be better, or some just thoughts that I had, if you can believe it. I know, it's so surprising for you. And my very first point is that sadly, I am not Bella's biggest fan. To me, she's annoying because I think she's a flat character, which is not like her bad, but like I think she's flat because her only purpose in life in this book is to love Edward. And she doesn't even have like an emotional journey in the book at all. Like she doesn't change as a person in almost any way, except that she like ends up kind of liking forks. And that's the only thing about her personality that changes. And that is like the whole point of a book is that the main character goes through a change. So it's crazy to me that she doesn't have one. She just lives life. So to me, that says that she's pretty flat. Like she doesn't even have likes or dislikes. Actually, that's wrong. She has a lot of dislikes. That's all she has. She hates rain. She hates snow. She hates school. She hates the fact that she's living in Forks. She hates everything. She hates everything. And there's not like a thing she likes other than the truck. And she comes across as a bit sour to me. And she's also the classic, like, I don't realize I'm beautiful, like type of trope that happens. And I think Myers honestly falls prey here too with the give a character a quirk to make them feel real syndrome. That's a really long syndrome. I know, I just prescribed her with it. But in writing, sometimes I feel like a writer, I've heard tips where it's like, if you want a writer to feel real, like give them a quirk that's like human. So like make them collect turtles or something. Like giving them like a weird quirk can make them feel real. But the problem with that is that often I think that they focus too much on that aspect of their character and it becomes their only personality trait. And for me, that happened here in that Bella's only personality trait, other than hating everything and being a pretty good cook, is that she's clumsy. And it's not even a personality trait. Like, she's just clumsy. Like, she's tripping in the whole book. And she's, like, so insecure about it. Won't even go to dances because she's so clumsy. And I'm like, it's too much. Like, I'm like, it's just too weird for me, right? And other than that, she does have an averseness to blood. But that's, like, completely forgotten. Like, it's never mentioned again. And I have troubles with books where the main character feels underdeveloped. Because who wants to read those, you know? And in this, I didn't like Bella because she did feel flat to me. She felt underdeveloped. Like, she doesn't like rain. She trips a lot. And that's basically her character. She's shy, but she's totally chill with Edward. She doesn't make any emotional journey. Like, she does in the fact that she's like, oh, I'm fine dying. But that's like such a passive role for her to take. The I'll do what I'm told, and when I do, I'm fine with it type of thing. I don't know. But my other problem is that since she's underdeveloped and since she is veritably obsessed with Edward, and it is like Edward is her entire life, I resent that in a feminist viewpoint. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just talk about characters for a moment. Now, Bella isn't the only one that comes across to me as flat. Rosalie is just a sour, jealous girl with absolutely no layers. All of her friends, I don't even remember her names. I didn't even mention them to you because the friends are barely in the book. I can barely tell the difference between all of the different boys and girls. I don't even know what they look like. Like, it's just, they don't feel real to me at all. Emmett is a frat boy. Jasper is just like a tortured, like, oh, my life is so hard type of boy. Alice and Esme being Carlisle's wife, feel more real to me. And Edward and Carlisle are oddly the realest characters to me, including Bella. Like, Bella is not even like the realest. Like, Edward and Carlisle are. And the reason why I think that is probably because we get backstory for them. We don't even get backstory for Bella. Like, we barely find out why she's here in Forks. Like, she briefly mentions like a weird history with her mom that we never get to hear about again. And she's the main character. Like, we have absolutely no history for her. We don't have a time where she was bullied. We don't have a memory to like nice times with her mom. Like, she doesn't have a backstory. How can I feel like I know a person if I don't know anything about them other than that they had a mom and they lived in Phoenix, and that's all we know about her? We learn more about Carlisle because his dad was a preacher, and we learn his whole story of how he became a vampire. And that emotional backstory makes him feel more real to me than Bella, the main character. So I don't know. It's just so odd. And to me, the parents are flat too, probably because they barely exist. And frankly, it isn't believable as a perspective for a minor for me. If you're going to make the parents not even be there and not have any trouble with her doing all this stuff and not have it be a point of tension where she has to keep this life quiet. Like, at the moment, Bella has absolutely no trouble keeping the secret of the vampires. Like, but if you want that tension, then you should include the parents and have her be like stressed about lying to them all the time, because that's like a part of her life. But if that's not going to be included, why not put her in college, right? Which makes more sense to me anyway, because what vampires want to redo school like 6 times in their entire life pretending to be high schoolers? Like, be in college. Like, put her in college if you want to just give her the autonomy of being an individual. I don't know why you'd put her in high school and give her parents if you're not going to include them. You know what I mean? So anyway, and that's kind of sad too, because Charlie seems like a really good guy and we never get to see or talk to him. And in fact, his story is never even resolved with Bella. Same with her mom. We see her twice for like a couple of scenes. And that's problematic for me because her mom spurns like a ton of the important choices. Like, she moves to Forks because of her mom, and we never get to meet her, really. Like, she talks to us like twice, but that's not really like knowing her. And then at the very end, she like is willing to die for her mom, a character that as the reader, we don't know her. So it's ridiculous to me. Like, maybe I would understand that whole, like, I'm okay dying for someone I love if I knew her mom at all, like if she had any fond memories that she could tell us. But unfortunately, we don't get that as a reader. I think the thing that annoyed me the most about this book was the characters, because I feel like all the other issues I have stem from that problem. So a couple of the other things that annoyed me was the feeling that Bella has no personal growth or journey, like I said. And that's because she has no personality issues to begin with and no backstory. There's also the issue that the book feels fast to me. So I like short chapters. That's not what I mean. I mean that in 2 pages, she's moved to a new city, hates it, and starts school. Every chapter jumps too quickly from point to me because no character has any emotional reaction. Bella stays boring and chill the whole time. Edward is tortured. Rosalie is pissed. Charlie's not around. If we jump from scene to scene where it's all description and no reaction, it's going to feel hollow and the plot will feel underdeveloped to me. This, in my opinion, also causes some of the feminist issues I have, such as nearly every girl being flat and, in general, awful. So Rosalie is super jealous and never makes any sort of change from that. We never learn why she feels that way. So what's the point? What's the point of making her mad all the time? Alice, of course, has a tragic past, unlike all the men in the story, and Bella's schoolmates are all conniving and jealous except for one girl who Bella never talks to, and Bella herself is in constant need of saving. She's the most vulnerable character I've ever read. She is completely incapable of taking care of herself. Instead, Edward has to save her constantly by being creepy, and she is totally cool with that. She has absolutely no backbone, no trepidation, no thought process, no nothing. She is like a shell of a person tripping into trouble with no arms or legs, just waiting to be saved. The feminist issue is distracting, to say the least. But with the comment that Myers based this book on Pride and Prejudice, it's actually a little laughable to me because this in no way reflects Pride and Prejudice. First of all, Bella is perfect from the beginning and has absolutely no trouble accepting Edward after their one day of miscommunication where he tries not to eat her. And one of the main themes of Pride and Prejudice is enemies to lovers. The whole time, she thinks Darcy's just like a total douche until the very end, which is the exact opposite of this. And enemies to lovers is a very famous trope in young adult reads that's not included here. The other issue is that Pride and Prejudice could also be considered as a satire about how marriage is a business transaction and how women's marriages define their existences. So there's an argument to be made in Pride and Prejudice that there are only 3 relationships available to women. One is a marriage that is based solely on a business transaction, and there's relationships of these in the books. It's like Charlotte and her cousin, blah, blah, blah. There's a relationship of respect and feelings that is mutually financially beneficial, such as Darcy and Elizabeth. And there is marriages based entirely on passion, like Lydia and Wickham, if you know the book. If you don't know the book, these are just names, but just ignore them. And that passionate one ends in embarrassment and sadness. If this book is based on Pride and Prejudice, I'd argue that Bella is Lydia, falling into a relationship based on nothing but passion and causing harm to her friends and family because of it. The idea that Austen is in any way comparable to this is like not a thing. Maybe, I guess it just inspired her, which I could see, I guess, but in my opinion, but not in my opinion. But remember, though, English is a lot of opinion, so this is just me, but in my opinion, it doesn't relate in any way. I also have an issue, honestly, with the vampires. Let's forgive the sparkle, because honestly, it was an original idea, so I'm okay with it. But it is so insanely obvious that they're vampires. Bella is supposed to be a smart character, and we see that only a couple times, but it's barely a mystery, and it takes her forever to figure it out. And when she does, there's absolutely no reaction. No anger to being lied to, followed, stalked, watched, listened in on, nothing. I wish we saw more fire in her. And since it is so key in the novel, I wish it had been more shrouded in mystery and suspense and worry. All we get is Edward telling her that he's dangerous. And I wish that had been shown to me rather than told. And that would have made the plotting, I think, a bit better. The writing itself is not bad. It's not Virginia Woolf, but it's descriptive, it's easy to digest, and I think one could think the writing is bad because of the characterization, because there's no emotion. But honestly, the writing is not that bad. I could have done with more showing rather than telling, like I said, especially times of action like the car crash, but otherwise it was pretty good. I think that the only thing that suffers as a result of the showing versus telling is the feeling of suspense that she's obviously trying to create. It's hard to feel suspense when we are told something like the "I'm dangerous" rather than something like "his strength filled my heart with cold fear and his dazzling skin looked like the edge of a blade." See how the telling me that you're dangerous doesn't build suspense like it does when I tell you that his skin is like a blade? The suspense is lost a touch in the emotionless reactions of Bella, because emotion is where suspense truly lives, in my opinion. Also, the idea that free agency that Myers has told her readers that is present in the book. The idea that a person, by the way, this is free agency, just a reminder, is the idea that a person needs to be tested to make the right choices and we all have the freedom of choice. It's a super interesting idea. Unfortunately, I see that mostly in the men of the story and not so much the women. So Edward has the freedom to choose not to be with Bella and to choose not to have not to chew on humans. But Bella is like a total slave to him. And Carlisle and the Cullens choose to be good people. Even Jacob and his dad have the freedom to warn Bella and choose not to fraternize with bad people. Unfortunately, Rosalie has no choice and is ignored in her annoyance with Bella. Her whole family's get over it. And Alice's whole history is a history of her having no choice. She was in jail and her parents faked her death. And lastly, Edward orders Bella around constantly and often gives her no choice. It's mostly out of concern, but it's really bossy. She gets stalked by people and he's like, "How dare you leave home alone?" And it's what? Why are you yelling at her? It's not her fault. And Bella really only makes 2 whole choices in this book. The choice to move, which is so downplayed that it doesn't even need to be included, really. You could just start not with that and it would make no difference. And the choice to give herself up for her mom. Those are both her own choices. And both are for a character that we barely see, her mom. And both result in danger, and the latter in near death. So the message that her making a choice equals consequences when everyone else's choices don't is problematic for me. And there's even Bella's wish to be turned, which would also be her choice, and Edward refuses her. It's a dumb idea, I think, to be a vampire, but why should Bella never get her own way in a book that is about choices? I think we need to look closer at that one. There's also the name Twilight, and I just want to say, I don't get it. I get it. It's about endings, right? Or because every time Edward looks at it, he's like, "Oh, things end all the time." But how is that related, right? I know that she mentioned that her work is about mortality and immortality. And I get the not so subtle concept, everything ends, including life, including their relationship, the feeling of doom, sure. But it doesn't, is that the whole thing? The theme of endings is not really present anywhere else in the book. I wish it reflected a big idea or a main idea, but unfortunately it really doesn't. Remember Catcher in the Rye? That title is literally the whole heart of the book, and you don't even realize it until the very end. But when you do realize it, it's important, right? It's the point of the book. Even Life of Pi is supposed to be his whole life and his choice of faith, because that is his life. So titles, I think, should suggest a deeper level, a deeper meaning that maybe you don't see that clearly. And Twilight so far is just a reference to endings and kind of tells you a little bit about Edward, and that's about it. So I don't know. That's all it does. It just, and it is ooh, vampires, Twilight. Well, that's it. Lastly, I just want to say, I know I am giving this book flack, but look, it's really hard to write a book. Like, try writing a book. It's much easier for me to read this and find issues because I'm looking at it from a certain lens. But at the end of the day, she had an original idea with original characters and it swept the nation. It was hugely successful. And I don't think it deserves the ridicule that it's like spurned. It's just a book. And it would be a great airplane read. I might even read like another one, albeit skipping any parts that seem slow. All in all, I have to say that it was an interesting concept and an entertaining story. So thank you for listening today to my very first Wednesday episode. If you'd like to support the podcast, I have a link to an online bookstore of books that I've read on the podcast. And what I think I'm going to be doing from here on out is I'm going to begin listing similar books that you might be interested in if you liked a specific book we've talked about. So if you like Catcher in the Rye, you might check out my Catcher in the Rye list and see other books that are similar to it. Anyway, if you have the time, please subscribe and review because it really helps me get out there and noticed. And join me next week for a summary and discussion about Carmilla by Le Fanu. It's the novella that inspired Dracula. So I'm sure you've heard of Dracula, but no one's really heard of this one. But it's actually very spooky, and I thought it would be really fun to talk about. And anyway, I just wanted to reiterate, thank you for letting me switch to Wednesdays. It's just much more helpful for me, and I really appreciate that I'm able to do that, and people will still be interested in listening to what I say. And I hope that you guys all have a lovely day and lovely week, and I'll see you next week, Wednesday, for Carmilla. And I love you all, lovelies. Goodbye.